Welcome, everybody. Here I am, Adam the Bull in the bullpen. Where the hell else would I be than talking to you? We've got a ton of football stuff to get into today. Cut downs, waiver wire, trades, free agency. It's bonkers with football right around the corner. Plus, who made the dumbest statement of the week? That's all coming up on today's podcast. And more good news for you. Get extra value this football season with Bet Rivers Squares. Win up to $10,000 in bonus money. $10,000. I could use $10,000. I'm sure Monzo could use $10,000. We can't win it, but you can in bonus money. $10,000. Bet $10 in same game parlays on any game with the Squares icon to earn a square. That's all coming up on this edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by Bet Rivers. Big news in the world of not Major League Baseball. There's plenty of big news there, but we're not getting into that right now. Big game, first week of the season in the state of Ohio. The Bengals and the Browns will play in Cleveland. It has not been very often in the history of these franchises that have not had a lot of success that both teams have been good in the same season. But that might be the case this year. The Bengals have been a Super Bowl contender and have gone to the Super Bowl in the last 2 years. And the Browns have Deshaun Watson, a loaded roster, and are hoping to go to the Super Bowl this year. The Browns, of course, the more unproven of the two teams, are now a 2.5-point favorite in Cleveland. And why did that line slightly go up in favor of the Bengals? Well, that's because Joe Burrow, for the first time in about a month, practiced today. Just got word out of Cincinnati a little earlier this afternoon. Spoke to my buddy James Rapine, who covers the Bengals. And he was telling me that Burrow looked great. Now now that we're into, technically it's regular season practice now and not training camp. So now that we're at this point, the media doesn't get to watch all of practice, unfortunately. But what he did see, Burrow looked good. He's not wearing a sleeve on the leg where he strained his calf. And so even though we haven't seen Joe Burrow in a month, it does appear that he is on track. He is on track to play in week 1 against the Browns. You always thought it would be the case. Our line here at Bet Rivers at the sports book never went. It opened at 3.5, if I remember correctly. The Browns were a 3.5 point. The Bengals were a 3.5 point favorite in Cleveland. It went down to 1.5 because there was some uncertainty, but had our guys that are making these lines thought that Joe Burrow was not going to play, the Browns would have been a favorite. If he wasn't playing, the Bengals backup quarterbacks, I can't even think of their backup now because they cut Trevor Siemian. They just signed Will Grier from the Cowboys, and that's how bad the Bengals backup is, that his name is escaping me right now, and I'm going to have to look it up because I can't think of who it is. Jake Browning. That's right. He's an unrestricted free agent. I don't think he's played in the NFL at all. But if Jake Browning would probably be the starter if Burrow couldn't go, and if that were the case, the Browns would be favored in this game. There's no doubt about it. But that's not the case. Burrow practiced today, so that's big news for Cincinnati. On the Browns side of things, when you look at what happened, nothing overly surprising for the Bengals on cutdown day. For the Browns, there were a couple of moves that the Browns made on cutdown day that were a bit surprising. One, let's start with the kicker, because that wasn't surprising by the time it came down. It's surprising only in the big picture that the Browns drafted this guy, Cade York, in the 4th round last year. He makes his first NFL game, kicks a game-winning 58-yard field goal against the Panthers after Baker Mayfield had led the Panthers back to take the lead and maybe get a victory. But the way he played the back end of last season and the way he played earlier this season, or in training camp, I should say, led to this situation where they had to move on. So the Browns did. Now, reportedly, they wanted to bring him back to the practice squad, but he did not get claimed on waivers, and he ended up signing with the Titans joining their practice squad instead. So Cade York is gone. They did, as some of you know already, many of you know already, they traded a 7th-round pick in 2025 to the LA Chargers for Dustin Hopkins. He's been a pretty good kicker in his career. He has lost his job twice, once in Washington, once in LA. Lost a battle this preseason in LA, and the Browns are able to acquire him. Why they didn't sign Robbie Gould, I have no idea. I talked about this in the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show earlier this week. Robbie Gould even reacted to the clip of me talking about it. He responded to the clip on Twitter. He is still out there. He denies that he's looking for an absurd amount of money. He is by far the best kicker available, but for some reason, nobody's brought him in. There must be something to it. I don't know what it is. I would have rather had him in Cleveland than Dustin Hopkins, but it is what it is. Right now, I'd much rather have Dustin Hopkins than Cade York. Another surprise, and probably the biggest surprise move, the Browns was cutting veteran defensive lineman Maurice Hurst. Maurice Hurst was was he a 3rd-round pick of the? Let me double check that. No, he was actually a 5th-round pick by the Niners, by the Raiders, excuse me, in 2018. He played, he played well, and he played well for Oakland, and then he went to the Niners. He was hurt the last 2 years, and now he comes to the Browns. I thought he played well in the preseason, seemed to be on the team. They cut him, but they bring him back to the active roster after they put a couple of guys on the injured list today. They claimed the guy off waivers from the Chiefs, and they bring back Maurice Hurst from the waiver wire. So there you go. So he will be back. Like I said, I was a little surprised that he got cut. Michael Dunn also returns to the Browns. He was the other surprise cut. He will be on the practice squad. Hurst will be on the NFL roster. The rookies that, the Browns had a lot of rookies make the team. All their draft picks made it, and they had 2 undrafted free agents. Mahmoud Diabate at linebacker, and Ronnie Hickman, who played at Ohio State, of course, is the 5th safety on this team. They kept 5 safeties and 6 corners. So a little surprising, 11 defensive backs, but at the moment, only 2 quarterbacks on the roster. They did mention they signed, I don't think I actually mentioned P.J. Walker, who started some games for Carolina last year. Brown signed him to the practice squad, so he'll be the 3rd quarterback to start the season. There'll be no rookie starting this year. Cedric Tillman, who was the 3rd-round pick, he will be in the mix. He'll get some action on offense, but he's at best their 4th wide receiver, so I don't know how much he'll play, especially early. Siaki Ika, the other 3rd-round pick, will rotate in with Shelby Harris, with Jordan Elliott, with Dalvin Tomlinson, of course, and Hurst inside. So he'll see some action, too. The rest of the guys may not play very much. DeJuan Jones is insurance for Jack Conklin. He's eventually the starter there. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, of course, is going to be Deshaun Watson's backup. Luke Whippler will back up. Probably, I would rather see him than Nick Harris, frankly, at either of the guard positions or center. He did a nice job making the team as a 6th-round pick. So there you go. The Browns roster is set. Week 1 is set. And now we're 8 days away from Lions-Chiefs, and we're 11 days away from the Browns playing the Bengals. Other news from the NFL that I wanted to hit on. So I read this story today from Ian Rappaport that apparently, at the deadline yesterday at 4 o'clock, the Colts did not trade Jonathan Taylor at the cutdown deadline. And he stays on the PUP list, which means he's going to, if you have, and I'm going to do a lot of fantasy stuff on Friday, by the way, but if you have Jonathan Taylor in a fantasy league, he's out the first 4 weeks. Now, so is Kyler Murray, but that was expected, if not more than that. But I think most people assume that Jonathan Taylor yesterday would either get traded or activated from the PUP list. Well, neither of those things happened. So if you drafted him already, you're in a bad position because I don't know who the hell knows when we'll see him. And we know for a fact we can't see him until at least the 5th week of the season. So that's a third of the regular season, or a little less than a third of the regular season of the fantasy season. That's pretty brutal. If you haven't done your fantasy draft yet, I have 4 drafts coming up. This Saturday, and then I have drafts Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. My last draft is happening an hour and a half before the Chiefs and Lions kick off That draft usually takes an hour and a half, so or maybe we'll be wrapping up as the game kicks off. But so I will be avoiding Jonathan Taylor at all costs. At all costs. But if you're going to take him, I would back him up to at least a running back 3 at this point. But what I read from Ian Rappaport was that apparently the Green Bay Packers were a team that was interested in making a trade for him, and that to me makes no sense. The Packers have 2 pretty good backs. I understand Jonathan Taylor's young. I understand Jonathan Taylor's a good player. But if you're Green Bay, you've invested a lot of draft capital at running back. You have Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. I mean, you just drafted A.J. Dillon 3 years ago. Now, they really don't have any depth behind that. They only have one other running back on the roster, and he's an undrafted free agent this year named Emmanuel Wilson. But still, I mean, I guess maybe Jones would have been part of the deal. Maybe I guess, but if you're Indianapolis, you got your quarterback of the future. But still, in a way, it's better for Indy if they're kind of bad again and can get another high pick because they're not going to be. Richardson is not going to be great as a rookie, you wouldn't think, even though he's going to play. But I don't understand that from Green Bay's perspective, why they were going down that road. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon are both good backs. Now, Jones is getting up there, and he's a free agent at the end of the year, so there's probably a good chance he's gone. But again, in a time where teams are not spending a lot of financial capital and running back, it doesn't seem to make much sense. Aaron Jones in his age 29 season, he was still very good last year, averaged 5.3 yards per carry. He's been a great back. I mean, he's been in the league for 6 years. He's averaged at least 4.6 yards per carry every year, and like I said, 5.3, not far off his, the best of his career, which was 5.5. 1,100 yards, not a lot of touchdowns last year, for whatever reason. He had 5 receiving touchdowns, but only 7 total touchdowns, which was the lowest of his career since his rookie season. But I think that's just coincidental. And he's been very durable. He's only missed 4 games the last 4 years and none last season. So even though he's a little older, he didn't really show any signs last year of going downhill. I didn't understand that. But the Colts are a mess. Their owner's an idiot. Let's face it. I mean, Irsay's a total putz. He don't know what he's doing. How did you end up in this situation? Jonathan Taylor's not. It wasn't like the other backs who were pissed off. Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs, and Saquon Barkley because they got franchised. They're all playing, and Jonathan Taylor. We're not even at that point yet, and Irsay screwed the whole thing up. I think my mic's a little hot. We got a hot mic. Hot mic. Hot mic. What was that from? I should know that. Wedding Crashers, maybe? Anywho, a couple other interesting notes from NFL Cutdown Day. Probably the biggest name to be cut yesterday was Bradley Roby, first-round pick out of Ohio State, cut by the Saints. That was surprising to me. Now, if you look at his PFF grades, some people care more about that than others. I pay attention to it. His grade last year was way down. He wasn't, very good. But still, it's a one down season. I'm not giving up on him after that, but they cut him. They decided to move on. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. And Bailey Zappi, who it looked like last year might steal the job from Mac Jones as the quarterback in New England, gets cut and then gets re-signed to the practice squad. The Patriots, when they at the cutdown day yesterday, had only 1 quarterback and 2 running backs, which was very bizarre. Obviously, Mac Jones is going to be the starter there. I don't think he's any good, which is why I don't think the Patriots are going to be any good, especially in an AFC that is loaded with talent. All right, that's, to me, the highlights of the cutdown day and everything that's kind of gone on in the last 24 hours. And now it's on to the start of the season. All right. Now, I want to bring Monzo in here for a minute. Monzo, you there?
I am here, but I should
Okay.
probably close the door so you don't hear my maniac crazy family in the background.
All right. We like a good maniac family. I'm going to bring you in, and I'm gonna ask you to choose who made the more idiotic statement. All right.
All right, I'm already gonna. All right, good.
All right. So you got two choices.
Okay.
Number one, we actually talked about this briefly, and this pissed me off in a staff meeting we had yesterday.
Oh, okay.
That is a world champion American sprinter Noah Lyles. Noah Lyles said this quote. He was talking about how in the NBA they call it a world, because he's a world champion, and he said in the NBA, he says, the thing that hurts me the most is that I have to watch the NBA finals and they have world champion on their head. World champion of what? The United States? Don't get me wrong. I love the U.S. at times, but that ain't the world. That is not the world. We are the world. Great song, by the way. We are the world. We are the children. We have almost every country out here fighting, thriving, putting on their flag to show that they are represented. There ain't no flags in the NBA. Okay, so is that now? You might think, well, that's the dumbest comment ever, because I thought it was the dumbest comment ever. But it is in fact, or is it in fact, Dan Orlovsky of ESPN, who I like, is a good football analyst. Was not a good quarterback, but is a good football analyst. Dan Orlovsky decided to talk about baseball. Now, I'm not usually a guy who when an athlete from one sport talks about another sport and they say something dumb, I never say, stick to your sport. I hate that. But for the first time ever, I'm breaking that because he said Mookie Betts is a better baseball player than Shohei Ohtani. So who made the dumber statement this week?
Noah,
Is
because
Noah
Mookie is
Lyles or
better than
Dan
Shohei.
Orlovsky? What's that?
Well, I think I would go with the Noah guy because I think Mookie Betts is a comparable baseball player. Obviously, he doesn't pitch, but he's a comparable offensive player of Shohei Ohtani. I don't think it's that that lunacy as you made it out to be.
It is lunacy.
It's not
What you said? He just doesn't pitch.
right. And then now Shohei's hurt, and who knows if he's going to pitch again? So I mean,
What? He's never gonna. Why? He's never gonna pitch again in the history of baseball?
who knows? Who knows?
I mean, he's only 29 years old.
That's the other thing. He's not like a kid. He's not like 22.
Well, it's not like Mookie Betts is that young
No, I
either.
understand, but if you look at Mookie Betts, 36, 94, 10 stolen base, I mean, he's a hell of a player.
Yeah, and Shohei beats him in all of those.
I know, but it's not like we're talking about Shohei Ohtani and Jeff McNeil. We're talking
Well,
about
wait a second here. If Dan Orlovsky had said Mookie Betts is a better hitter than Shohei Ohtani, I would have said, Dan, you're wrong. But at least you can maybe make that argument. That's not what he said. He said he's a better baseball player. So it's everything he does.
okay. Shohei's probably a 10 times better pitcher than Mookie Betts is. I don't
10
think
times.
Okay.
Try 1,000 times.
1,000 times better, but it's. I don't think it's that horrifying. The other
All right,
statement is absolutely moronic. It's just
okay. Now, even though I'm giving you a hard time, I am going to agree with you. Now, Dan Orlovsky is lost in the soup because you can't compare. Because if you want to say Mookie Betts is the second best player in baseball, then we can have a debate between him and Acuna and Freddie Freeman.
I would prefer. I'm a Met fan. I'd prefer the Mets next season if they can't sign him, but I would prefer that if the Mets had Mookie Betts or Shohei Ohtani, it's a win-win. Whatever player.
Of course, it's a win-win, but you'd rather have Shohei Ohtani because he can pitch.
Coming off this UCL, who knows?
Well, he won't be able to pitch next year, probably. But.
Okay, so now he's going to pitch at 31, limited pitching. The strain it puts on his body, it might affect his hitting at some point. I don't know if he's going to pitch forever.
I would argue that if you're going to make that argument of who you'd rather have next year, you might want Ronald Acuna over both of them because he's a lot younger.
Okay, for sure.
But nonetheless, I have a beef with Orlovsky on that. But I'm going to let it ride because he argued with Stephen A. Smith about Joe Burrow today. Because Stephen A. Smith said, by the way, we could have put Stephen A. Smith in this too because Stephen A. Smith today said that Lamar Jackson has a better chance of winning the MVP than Joe Burrow. Which even though the funny thing is that Lamar Jackson has won an MVP, Joe Burrow has not won an MVP, and yet I think we'd all agree that Joe Burrow is much more likely to win an MVP than Lamar Jackson. Is that fair to say?
That very, very much more likely.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
that's one that Stephen A. is a little out of
yeah.
bounds
He's
on.
lost. He's lost. However, in the end, you are correct. And the dumbest statement of the week was made by Noah Lyles. Now, I actually texted someone who knows Noah Lyles, believe it or not. Shout out to my man Corey Crawford. So Jay Crawford, who used to be on ESPN for many years, is one of my co-hosts on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. And his son, Corey, is was the last guy to not make the Olympic team. He was like the final cut off the Olympic team. He just missed a cut. Guy's an incredible athlete, high jumper, long jumper, excuse me. So he knows a lot of these great track stars. And he says that the kid's a great kid, that maybe he said this because he's frustrated that he's had a lot of success and he doesn't seem to get noticed a lot because obviously, most track stars don't get noticed like basketball players and baseball players and football players. I get it. But in the end, so maybe he was just, talking out his ass. But it was so funny because every NBA player had a comment about this. And obviously, it's a ridiculous comment by the guy because American basketball is it. Doesn't mean they're all American players, but all the best players from the world come and play in the NBA. They're not playing in the Euro League. They're not playing in the Chinese League. They're not playing in the Russian League. They're playing in America. End of conversation. So if you win the NBA championship, this is not soccer where there might be a team in Italy or there might be a team in, out of Spain that's as good as a team in the Premier League. I don't even know which league is best. I think the Premier League's the best, but I'm not even sure. But clearly there are teams in the Premier League that may not be as good as teams in the Italian league or the whatever. But in America, when it comes to baseball, football, and basketball, not just America, in those three sports, the best teams play in America. Same with hockey. Okay? That doesn't mean the players are all from America. In football, most of the players are from America. In hockey and baseball, especially, there's a lot of players from other countries. And even in basketball, there's a decent amount of players from other countries. But it's the World Championship because the best team in the Japanese league would be terrible in the major leagues. The best team in Euro basketball would be terrible in the NBA, the worst team in the NBA. And is there Euro hockey? Or is that just off season? I don't know.
It's the KHL and the Russian.
Whatever. I'm assuming, I don't know enough about hockey, but I'm assuming the best team there would be the worst team in the
No,
NHL.
that's probably not true, to be honest.
Maybe not true?
Yeah.
All right, so maybe in hockey, maybe he's right about hockey. But I don't think he was thinking about hockey. He really was talking about basketball. So congratulations to Noah Lyles. He wins the Dopey Comment of the Week award.
That is a stupid comment. That's
just insane. It's insane. All right, Monzo, thanks for playing along. Thanks to everybody for listening. I'll be back on Friday. We're going to do a big fantasy show, getting you ready for all your drafts. It's the week before. That's when everybody's doing. The real hardcore players are all drafted in the final week. Thanks. That's it for me. I'm Adam the Bull. This is the Bullpen. We'll see you next time, courtesy of Bet Rivers.